Hi everybody, welcome back to microbiology. I'm Professor Gustin and we are in week 4. There we go. Eukaryotic microorganisms. And I'm just gonna, let's see. Actually, let me just think back on so far. We've had week 1, 2, and 3. I've talked to a lot of people in the class and I appreciate that. I really appreciate the folks that get started early and tell me if I forgot to open something up or something like that. So thank you if you've done that. And let's see. I think you're going to start feeling like this is getting to be routine with just a different topic. So here we go. Eukaryotic microorganisms, and you found the video. Remember to print out the lecture study guide and then watch the videos to fill in the lecture study guide. And then you're going to do the adaptive learning lecture assignment. So, and you'll notice it's a little bit shorter on content this week. Part of that is because next week is going to be a killer. And you can get started this week. And I'll talk about next week in a minute. So once you've done your lecture videos, you do your adaptive learning lecture assignment. And then we have a lab, and it's on differential and structural stains. And this is something we do in the live lab. So I hope you can relate to that and you can get an appreciation for some of that importance. And there's a bunch with the lab handout. Remember, print out the lab handout and fill it out. The virtual labs are listed here. There's also a lab assignment, which is like a lecture assignment. It's just a different topic and it's much shorter. So there's one of those. And then a bunch of virtual labs to finish. Finally, once you finish your lab handout, some of the questions on there will show up on the lab quiz. So you can use your lab handout to answer the questions on the lab quiz. And so that's week 4. And hopefully you'll find it pretty straightforward. I think this is some of our lesser challenging information. It's not too tough and there's not a lot of it. So you study it, you should be in pretty good shape. But you put this together with the week 1, week 2, and week 3 lecture, you get exam number 1. So recall that exam number 1 is during week 5. We're in week 4 right now. Exam number 1's week 5, and it's going to be on the lecture materials from week 1, 2, 3, and 4. So far, what you have done is filled out handouts, watched a lot of videos, done these lecture assignments, but you haven't really had to memorize things. Even our lab quiz, you could use the lab handout to answer that. So this is your time to start really committing things to memory. When you go to study for exam number 1, I recommend you do it over several days because you study and then you go to sleep, and then you study and you go to sleep, which means overnight. That sleeping helps solidify memories. So I recommend that you study over several days. What are you going to study? You're going to pull out your lecture study guides, and that has all those learning outcomes. So go over one, read the learning outcomes, see if you can answer it out loud, and use the vocabulary that's listed there. See if you can answer some of the questions that are in the handout. All those things are there for you to practice for the exam. I get all the exam questions out of those learning outcomes and that vocabulary. What the kinds of questions you're going to see are a lot of multiple choice, a bunch of short answer, and usually it's more like short answer, fill in the blank, or maybe a sentence, or explain in a sentence or two something. But you'll see mostly multiple choice, some short answers, some fill in the blanks, those kind of things. So you want to start getting this material, practicing it, saying it out loud. You can go back. Remember, you can do these lecture assignments again. If you go to Connect and it says recharge, that means you can do it again without affecting your grade that you already have. So you can practice those, but try practicing without your book. Try to practice them from your memory. Okay, the other thing that's going to happen next week, in week 5, is we have our first lab practical. And it sounds absolutely cruel that I'm doing your first exam and your first lab practical during the same week. You'll notice the other content for that week is relatively low. You don't even have a lab outside of the lab practical. So you need time to study for the exam and for the lab practical. The lab practical comes right from your lab handouts. There's a lot of pictures. Look at the questions in your lab handouts. Those are the kind of things I'm going to ask you on the lab practical. You should be able to look at a picture and, for example, I'll say, what shape are these cells? And I'll show you a picture. You can say Bacillus, Coccus, or Spiral. Or are they Streptococcus or Staphylococcus? Is it gram-positive or gram-negative? What's the name of this tool? I'll show you a picture. So in the lab practical, you're going to study your completed lab handouts. I'll talk more about that in the week 5 video. But the final thing I want to mention this week is, remember, in week 2, I posted the Respondus practice quiz. For exam number 1 and lab practical number 1, you will use Respondus. That Respondus practice quiz, you remember I said it's posted in week 2, but the due date was at the end of week 4, at the end of this week. I notice a bunch of people haven't done it yet, so do the Respondus practice quiz sooner rather than later, because if you're having a problem with it, I'm not going to tell you, oh, you got to week 5 and Respondus isn't working, well, you get to change the due date. No, you've had weeks to get this straightened out. So go try the Respondus practice quiz and make sure you can do that. Meanwhile, if there's anything you want to talk about or anything I can help you with, please reach out and keep up the good work. You guys are really moving along. I'm having very few people missing many assignments, so good for you guys, and have a great week number 4.